right. Before we start, why don't we first do
This is the state of the nation. Irifa Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Ssali.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Henry Ssali, and this is the state of the nation. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous peoples from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Henry Ssali. We are still interrogating the same question. Is Uganda ripe for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Now, many of you might be asking themselves, what does he mean when he talks about a Truth and Reconciliation? Usually, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions happen because of challenging histories within a certain country. In the context of Uganda, we feel like it's about time for us to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission beyond the liberation. Many of you know about the 1980, 1985, 86 liberation war that brought the NRM into government. After over 36 years, many things have happened. There has been a conundrum of peace, instability, even when they talk about stability a lot, but also injustices amongst certain sections of the population, to the extent that now when certain people pass, there are some sections of Ugandans who celebrate instead of coming together as a people, a country, and mourn together and celebrate the people, the elders, the liberators. And some of us are thinking that perhaps we need to have some sort of conversation that is supposed to be a heart-to-heart conversation, one that is going to speak to some of the challenges that have happened in the past, and see how we can move forward with our challenges. Now, today I have three distinguished panelists that are going to engage in this conversation, including our very own Mr. Julius Mitala, who many of you already know, who is with us here in the studio today. The other two panelists are still trying to get into the studio. Of course, they are in Uganda. We think that this conversation is vital, but most importantly, we think that this conversation should happen with our brothers and sisters in Uganda. So we try to give them an opportunity to come and speak their mind, to share their thoughts and insights on how we should be moving forward. This is our country. Uganda is our country. We may not be living there right now, some of us who are in the diaspora, but we still have families and property in that country. So we do have ties in that country. We think that it's important for us to have these conversations with our colleagues on the ground. so that we can better understand the contexts, um, which some of us examine from afar. I think it's important for us to have these conversations with our brothers and sisters on the ground. Another person in the studio with us today is going to be Sayuni Hellen, and of course, Bazil Mwotta. Uh, Sayuni Hellen is here. Of course, she's still struggling with the internet. She keeps coming and coming in and out. But whenever it's stable, we shall definitely let her in. In the meantime, I'm going to invite my brother, Mr. Julius Mitala, also counsel, to introduce himself. Of course, we were with him last weekend. This is just part two of that conversation. Last weekend, we heard from General Engineer Tony Olang and economist Susan Namata, of course, with Julius Mitala in the house. Julius Mitala is back. He's a regular, he is a regular State of the Nation uh, panelist. But today we have two new faces. Perhaps that explains why they are still struggling with getting into the studio. But they'll be in as soon as possible. Mr. Julius, nice to have you back.
Yes, Henry, thank you very much. Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, to be here. For me this is my Sunday, it's my Sunday cup of tea, it's my Sunday biscuit. When I talk about a cup of tea, that's typical of the British way of life. You cannot talk about a British way of life and not talk about a cup of tea. Of even though that is representative of of the empire, cups of teas and stories of slavery and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's great to be here, Henry. Thank you for availing us the space to have these honest discussions. Of course, we are grateful to the University of Toronto African Alumni Association for providing the space as well. Without wasting so much time, Julius Mitala is my name. I'm based in the UK. I've been here for a while. My background is legal. I prefer to go by the name Mitala Mzukuru wa Mswangari as per my screen. And I'm glad to be back, to continue the conversation about the processes of transition and change and truth and reconciliation, the commissions, and so on and so forth. I think there will be quite a number of questions that we'll want to be exploring and trying to, put some context into some of those issues, because this is a really, really important discussion, especially where we happen to be as a nation presently, that we are really at we are really at that juncture where these conversations are really and truly necessary. If you look at the turmoil, the tensions from a tribal perspective, and all the other persisting issues, that are, constraining us as a nation, as a people, to be able to forge, healthy ways forward. So I'm really definitely looking forward to this conversation, and I hope my colleagues, together we shall be able to make a contribution towards that for today. Thank you very much, Henry.
And of course, as we continue to have this conversation, and I mean, before we start having this conversation for real, uh, I know that you live in the UK. I know that the world has experienced the saddest death beside my mom's, of course. The saddest death of the world. The world seems to be saddened, if not really saddened, uh, about the passing of Her Majesty the Queen,
Mhm.
who passed on this week or last week. Today's Sunday, so last week.
Mm.
Uh, how is the feeling there? I know Mota will be speaking about his experience meeting the Queen in London. Did you meet the Queen? You live in the UK. Did you meet the Queen before? And what are your thoughts? How are you guys keeping on and uh,
I,
trying
I,
to
I,
mourn the Queen?
I am just an ordinary fella, so I've not had the opportunity to meet the Queen. My meeting with the Queen has literally been, virtual, on TV, if I should put it, just like everybody else. But there has been so many moments, where I feel like you have, in some respects, personally interacted with this lady, and one has really to acknowledge the fact that she's been a pillar. She's been a strong pillar, not only in the United Kingdom, but across where within the Commonwealth and all the other realms where she's the head of state. I am pretty sure that she will be missed. It's a transforming moment. It's a significant moment that many of us perhaps will never be able to witness again. And as much as there is the sadness in her passing, but also there is the realization that something huge and significant has just happened. On our watch. Because if you think about it, and I think for me, one of the things that this brings up, it brings up this great admiration and respect for an institution that is able to conduct itself amidst all the challenges, to
Right.
conduct itself the way it conducts itself and still preserves its relevancy, because that's really something that is it's huge and it is significant. I have watched very closely, for obvious reasons, that we are having a new head of state in the names of Charles III now, who was traditionally been known as the Prince of Wales, or just simply Prince Charles. Is now ascended the throne. There's a very different dynamics. I believe he's a very experienced man. He's been there side by side, step by step with his mother over the years for over 76 years. I think if you talk about apprenticeships, if you talk about learning on the job, I don't think there's anybody who can lay that claim to learning on the job than the current King Charles. So I've listened to him, I've listened to his speeches, and I think he provides the reassurance. He's obviously taking over the throne at a very challenging time, without knowing whether the institution or the community of the Commonwealth can be preserved going forward. Uh, you can see all these forces that are pulling across so many different areas. We hope that uh, we can only hope that common sense will prevail.
Right.
Those who want to go their separate ways, of course, they are free to go their separate ways. But I think these institutions, whether we want them or not, I think they have a purpose to serve, and I think that purpose is for the good cause overall. So it will be sad, really, to miss the Queen, but I think there is assurance in the fact that there is very clear continuity, and it is hoped that it will be okay going forward.
When she just passed, one of the very first comments you made to me was that this is a momentous moment in our lives.
It is.
And I think those words actually signify uh, the moment as it was. We were following the events very closely, very early in the morning. I usually wake up and ride, if not run, before I go to work. And I was on my bike listening to some news, trying to catch up uh, on the world news, and I heard that she was being closely monitored
Mhm.
by her doctors, and of course, the Prince of Wales, the Prince of Cornwall, who is the same person, the new king now,
Mhm.
uh, and his sons had to trek uh, to Scotland to meet their mom, the Queen of England, the Queen of the UK. Uh, I've never had that kind of communication before. And watching CNN as it does, usually monitoring every moment uh, of her last moment as a queen, like it was really momentous. And for us who are also who pay allegiance to the queen, now the uh, King Charles the third. Of course, we're following these events very closely.
Mhm.
And this happens, well, this happens at this time. We know that there are very many forces trying to disintegrate the Commonwealth and everything that has happened from reanalyzing history and bringing talking about the without some without even putting it in the context in place. Uh, and you wonder how we are going to proceed. But like you said, I think King Charles III is very well experienced. We are going to interrogate this in on a
Mm.
different day, probably, uh,
Mm.
trying to um, trying to compare life presidencies
Yeah.
to to the monarch and the bringing up of uh, our or the heirs or the people who come to take over as sovereigns. I think what I appreciated most with the king, what I realized is that when the queen passed,
Mhm.
Charles automatically became king, which means that the sovereign did not die.
There was no gap. There's
There
no
was no
room.
gap whatsoever. That I think that's
There's no space
amazing.
for that. Yeah.
Like, when do we start planning like that as Africans? Like the moment, because I've been watching this documentary, London
Mm.
Bridge is down.
Mm. Mm.
And now I realized actually London Bridge was deliberate and it's actually there. It is a structure that was created and they follow it to the script.
Mm.
Yet we do not have these kinds of structures in Africa, even within our cultural contexts. The Buganda Kingdom, the Toro Kingdom, the Busoga Kingdom. Like there is always uncertainty with
Mm.
such a we somehow always lose a sovereign when we shouldn't be losing a sovereign.
You, you
But anyway,
know,
that will be
you
another conversation. I
Yeah.
think
It would be a very and I don't want to do injustice to Mr.
Mr.
Bazil
Mota, yeah,
because I know he's here listening to us. But just very quickly to add on to that, there's just 2 points I want to make very quickly. I think one of the charges that I've had, for instance, from Julius Malema of South Africa, from
yeah.
the economic freedom fighters. He published a very strong statement that stating that for them as the EAF, they do not mourn the passing of the Queen because they attribute most of the sufferings of the people in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere, to the forces that she represented. In as much as that is true, but I think what somebody cannot take away is that let's think about independent Africa. This woman, if she accessed the throne in 1952 or just somewhere there, just a few years later, Africa was beginning to consolidate the journey towards its independence. And the first country that we see becoming independent in Africa is Ghana, 1957. So she had been on the throne just for a couple of days. Biblically, for those who are Christians and believers, there is always that saying that you don't visit the sins of the son or the father onto the child. So yes, the empire had its problems, but I think this woman has she has gone about business with a lot of respect and dignity. She's been the epitome of humility, if you could put it that way. She's provided stability, which is very important for any country that desires to develop and move forward in terms of things of that context. So she will really be missed. And for those of us, this young generation, it is really a moment to ponder. It's a moment to reflect on and think about. Think about the lubrication of the British royal system, and especially what you are referencing there, that there is no even space for the gap. That uncertainty does not exist, and I think that creates that stability and being able for countries to maneuver themselves and move forward without so much conflict and difficulties. So it's really important, and it's a big moment, but we shall see how the story develops further from there on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala. You are a lawyer. We do have a lawyer in waiting, Mr. Bazil. Mwotta Bazil Bidemu is a law student at Makerere University. He is a qualified teacher, of course, from Makerere University. and he has had an opportunity to meet the Queen. Uh, I'm very interested in hearing what his story is, what he feels right now, and if he can talk to us about what he felt when the Queen passed, and perhaps even some of the conversations they had with the Queen, because I've been listening a lot to some of the interactions that people have had with the Queen. Specifically, I followed the common the House of Commons in the UK. Each MP was talking about their moment with the Queen, the conversations they had, and I think those tell you a little bit about the person that we only watch on TV, some of us.
Mhm.
So when you hear those moments from people who've actually interacted with the person, you get to perhaps understand that even though the sovereign was that powerful, there was an aspect of humanity within her, and that's what I think we need to interrogate and uh, try to understand what was she as a grandma, what was she as a mother. Of course, those we can only hear from the royals, but then what was he as a human being? Those are the small conversations we hear from the Bazils of this world and the MPs from the House of Commons. So Bazil, nice. First of all, thank you for coming to the State of the Nation. We are excited to have you. Uh, Tell us about your experience about the Queen before we delve into our conversation whether uh, Uganda is ripe for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yes, thank you very much, Henry, for this opportunity, and thank you for having us. My internet has been intermittent. You know the internet of Uganda, but I'm glad that I can now be heard and I can join you all. My name is Bazil Mwotta. I am a student of law. I am now in my fourth year at Makerere University. Meeting the Queen, wow. I barely slept the night before because for me it was unbelievable. A young man from Kamocha, from the ghetto, being given an opportunity to meet the queen. And when I met her, she was a humble person. She was interested to listen about what I do, about how I do it, about where I stay, how I came to do it. And for me, the news of her demise hit me really hard. It's one thing to know someone, it's one thing to hear about someone or watch them on TV. It's another to have met them, to have shared memories with them. You could feel how human the Queen is, even when people have different things they say about her, some good, some bad. But when you meet her in person, you see humanity, and that is what leadership is about. It's about being human, showing courtesy, showing that you're concerned about the people, about what the young people are doing. Through the Queen's Young Leaders Initiative, the Queen was able not only to meet 240 people, among who I am, but also empower them because we did a leadership training program in Cambridge University. And through the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, she's been according grants to youth to help them on top of all the other things. So her demise really hit me hard, and I pray that her soul rests in peace. But we have solace in the new King Charles. I did meet him when I was in Buckingham, but over the years he has shown that he is an able leader, and I believe that England is in good hands.
All right, the UK and of course the entire Commonwealth is in good hands. Of course, we now say that long live the king. Sayun is finally here with us, and we are excited to to have you, Sayun. I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. And if you have any comments regarding the Queen, you're welcome to say them. But of course, we commensurate with the UK, the royal family, and of course the entire Commonwealth. Those who believe in it and those who do not believe in it yet. I think the conversation continues. Sayun, welcome to the State of the Nation. Introduce yourself. Unmute and introduce yourself. I know the internet has been disturbing you, so hopefully you can actually speak and we can hear you. You have to unmute yourself. I'm not sure if you're speaking because I can't see your picture.
Yes, can you get me now?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Good evening, Henry, and the two co-panelists. I've been struggling with network. I've actually not been able to get it in my house, so I'm outside in the darkness. That's why I'm unable to put on my video.
I know. It's okay.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I'm so glad to be here. This is a very good space. The topic is very timely. In fact, have you had this started to talk about these things like in the 2000s when I was a little bit more young. Maybe to commiserate with the UK and with the death of the Queen, we are really feeling sorry for those people. And Uganda, is among the Commonwealth countries, so we really commiserate with the people of the UK.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Sayun, for joining us once again. You are the Vice President of UID. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
All right. Okay, so I guess now we are going to get into the Ugandan conversation. And I want to give Council Mitala an opportunity to start this conversation because he was here last weekend. Of course, the panelists last weekend seemed to all agree that Uganda is ripe for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So, Mr. Mitala, first of all, I want you to bring us to speed, especially your two fellow panelists. What is the importance of having a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? What would that mean for Uganda? And why do you think it's important?
To start with, I think to draw the background, and I'm not going to try to go so much into the detail because I'm pretty sure the followers will be able to follow this conversation, and the panelists will also be able to follow this conversation very briefly. But we just need to understand what is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, what is its purpose, what is its limitation, and then we ask ourselves the question that does the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, if any, how does it impact, how does it affect our democratization process? How does it help us heal the wounds? How does it help us form, that common journey? How do we embark on that common journey together, without without involving ourselves so much into conflict and social disharmony and so on and so forth? One of the things that I would say right from the onset is that truth and reconciliation commissions, or truth commissions as they are so commonly referred to, they have become very, very popular and very common in international human rights jurisprudence. But I think these have been employed so much in countries that are emerging from conflict, because obviously, as you know, post-conflict, there is always a need for people to have some form of reflection, sit back and understand what are the causes of the problems that you have endured, and how could you possibly be able to avoid those problems being repeated going forward. There are always crimes of a heinous nature that are committed during times of conflict, either from one party to another, but these crimes are usually committed against innocent people, And this is where truth and reconciliation commissions come into play. The question that somebody gets to ask themselves, that are they an alternative? Could they be an alternative to, to justice, to the court procedural systems, to judicial systems as as a mechanism of resolving conflict and facilitating peace and stable communities? So that is really the context of where we are. Now, to put that into the picture, we have to look at ourselves. You know, somebody stated somewhere that in order for a community to be comfortable with itself, that community has got to accept its own illusions. You know, we have to set the terms of our own truths. What are our truths? What are those sorts of things we are willing to accept, that this is our truth? And of course, that means coming face to face with the reality of the past and all the troubles that we have encountered, in the past, so that we can be able to set an agenda that takes us forward towards a journey of peace. So, truth and reconciliations, I think that's, for me, that's my understanding. Obviously, as we did discuss last weekend, we agreed that there is a need for a truth and reconciliation kind of arrangement in the current Ugandan context. There are so many. There is demand. There is hunger. There is anger. There is disunity. There is disjunction among the people. There is tribalism. There's a group of people that feel that they have been left behind. They are not sharing in the national cake. There is aspects of human rights violations, abductions, murder, people unable to access, the court system and get justice and fairness, disenfranchisation, loss of access to property rights, name them, and all those sorts of things. So the ingredients for a truth and reconciliation kind of arrangement in our Ugandan context are ready and they are available. So we then ask the question that if we are accepting that we are at that juncture where we are ready to have those national conversations for the purpose of facilitating our peace and stability in the context of the transition, because obviously there is a current arrangement and it's a given fact. We have been talking about the demise of the Queen. She's been on the helm of government of state for the Commonwealth, over 2 billion people, across 56 nations for 70 years. A time came and she had to give way. Time will come where the current leadership in Uganda will have to give way. Whether you want it or not, time will come where the leadership will have to give way. But if they do give way, what do they bequeath? What is the inheritance that they are bequeathing Uganda? We were told in 1986 that we are going through a fundamental change, and lots of things have happened ever since then. We can evaluate whether that fundamental change was actually fundamental change, what sort of substantive change has it brought in the lives of day-to-day common people. And again, we did state that we have had an attempt at truth and reconciliation twice in our Uganda's history. 1974, we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was a whitewash because the late President Idi Amin that succumbed to international pressure, amidst the ongoing, accusations of human rights violations, mass murders, political detentions, and abductions, and all those sorts of things. So he needed to get the international community off his chest, and on account of that, he succumbed to a commission in 1974, whose report was published. It's duly available. Following on that, we had a second attempt in 1986, and the recommendations of that report, or the findings of that report, were that there had been very serious, human rights violations, and those are challenges we needed to face head on in order for us to be able to forge a way forward, with the whole intention that we should not return to the period that we had been examining in the past. Unfortunately, as a matter of fact, if you look at our current situation, all those things that were investigated by the factual finding mission of the late Justice Ode, Mr. Nagenda, Mr. Philip Sekandi, Mr. Sekandi, who was the Speaker of Parliament and Vice President later on. All those issues that were, investigated or looked at the 1986 fact-finding mission, abductions, state abductions, violations of human rights, elements of all kind, detention without trial, and so on and so forth. All those things seem to be existent in our context today. So the question for me is, what were the missed opportunities? And if there were those missed opportunities, how can we be able to navigate ourselves away from those kind of challenges? So that is the context of the background to the discussion today.
Right, and you talk about missed opportunities. What were they, and how can we move forward from where we are today? Because of course it is evident that there's a lot of tribal sentiments that are not very good. These seem to be continuing to increase instead of decreasing, and of course the leadership seems to be to think that they are unshakable and therefore they do not. I don't know what they are thinking actually, but they do not seem to think about um, democratic engagements with the citizens of Uganda. Especially because last weekend you talked about having presidential directives instead of having a democracy. Institutions do not work anymore. Even the courts of law seem to be listening to one person who tells them whatever they want to do. This week I had a few comments from the speaker, and of course we have heard that she's being trailed. We don't know to what extent how true that is. Uh, but when you hear all these back and forth seeming conflicts within our institutions, you have to wonder where our country is going and whether we are ready to take on the leadership of that country if we are not willing to talk about uh, the seeming wrongs or weaknesses that are within our institution. That are within our institutions. I'm going to invite the lady in the house. Miss Sayun, what are your thoughts? How do you see the state of the country as it is right now? Uh, and have you thought about this notion of having a truth and reconciliation commission? Do you think uh, when Ugandans convene and speak their truth about how they should be governed and how they have been governed in the past and how they think they should be governed going forward, do you think that's a conversation that is necessary? And how should that conversation be brought about within our context?
Thank you so much, Ssali, and the co-panelists. Sorry to the question. I think it is actually very, very timely for us to have the talk. When you talk of reconciliation, that means there are some people that are aggrieved. When you talk of the truth, that means there are people that are not talking, have not been talking about, people that haven't been telling us the truth. So I believe it is high time that we sat down as a country. And how are we going to sit down? We have cultural leaders, we have religious leaders, we have political leaders, and we have those who we trust, though not in position, but are people who we know that when they get there, they can actually speak on our behalf. What do I mean here? There are a lot of divides in this country. We must accept that the divides are there are the people that have power, there are people who actually completely have no power, they're powerless. Then we've got actually another battle that we are not actually looking at as generation, but there's also another battle of generation. You discover there are 3 generations in the middle here. There is the generation of the President Museveni, there is a generation of the Honorable Robert Mao, and there is a generation of the Bobby Wines, and now there is another generation popping up. So all those generations have different grievances. You discover we're in a government where we have political leaders, someone sits somewhere and says, I cannot dine with a junta. In other words, I cannot meet President Museveni. That itself shows you that there is a grievance in between us. You discover there is. Lately, we lost General Tumwine. You saw how some people were over media celebrating. What does it show? It shows you that there are people that are not happy with something, and that unhappiness and dissatisfaction is what calls for truth and reconciliation. We have truth and reconciliation would not only focus on the present, it focuses on the past actually. So we have people of the Luwelo Triangle, people who lost people massacred. We have the northern part of Uganda that took over 14 years struggling with FRA. We are not talking about that. We have a lot of divides that actually call for us to have this truth and reconciliation commission. We need to sit on a round table and talk to each other. What does this mean? We need people who, there is need for amnesty for those that will confess that there is something that has been done. There is need for reparation or maybe compensation for some people that will have. But we have a lot of people here that are hurt as a result of what is going on. We need sober minds to sit together and agree that this government or this country as Uganda is bigger than all of us. And thus we need to sit and discuss and redirect this country to where we want it to be. Apart from having a few people who will sit somewhere and design it for us, we have to agree that we are all stakeholders in this government or in this country as Uganda, because we can never have another country as Uganda. Trust me, you are born in Uganda, you can go somewhere, have there some peace for 2-3 years, but Uganda remains, and this is where we have to shape it. I want to thank you that you're outside the country, but you take in the responsibility to have such platforms to which we can discuss and maybe provide shape for Uganda. At least that is a credit for me to you, Mr. Ssali.
Thank you so much again, Ms. Sayuni, for that perspective about why we must have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Of course, one of the most important aspects of your insights or your conversation is that the aggrieved must be listened to by those with power. And I think that's very important. Of course, when you see people celebrating death, you must not first and foremost be upset that they are celebrating death, but you must question, you must ask yourself, why? Why are people responding in such a manner? And what do we need to change to ensure that this does not continue to happen? Even when we have disagreements among ourselves. Mr. Mwotta, you have had the conversation. What are your thoughts? I know you're a qualified teacher. Of course, you know the aspects of education and how that translates into your growth as a young man who wants to develop the country. You are also very much involved in charity, but now you are also pursuing law. Do you think we have a case when we say that we should have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And how is it going to help Uganda become a better country?
Yes, thank you very much, Henry. There is need for a candid and honest conversation about the injustices in Uganda, because there are injustices there. The question is, how will they do this? What will the commission constitute? Because like Council Mitala has told us, I want to add on what a truth commission is. And a truth commission, and many people have referred to it as a truth and reconciliation commission, or truth and justice commission. It is an official body tasked with discovering and revealing past wrongdoing by a government in the hope of resolving conflict left over from the past. We've seen a lot of these. For example, in 1996, there was one in South Africa after apartheid. The question is right now, whereas we all agree that there is need of having candid conversations, honest conversations, who will constitute commission? Because then they will delve into some of the matters that have been unfair or unjust in the past 30 years or so. And if the current government is to appoint whoever will be on the commission, then there will be no candid conversation. There will not be honest conversation. Council Mitala will tell you about separation of power and the principle of nemo judex in causa sua. If this government is the one to select whoever will be on the commission, then there will no, there will not be truth, there will not be justice, there will not be fairness. But there is need for one. But we also need to talk about transition. When should we get a new government? How should we get it? Because it is then that the Truth and the Justice Commission will be more relevant. We can always have these conversations, and I thank Mr. Henry for putting there such platforms, such forums where we can come out and speak about these things. But there is a need for a legal body, a recognized body that will come in and ask the questions that people do not want to hear and find out the truth that is there so that people get justice, because a lot of people's rights have been infringed upon, and there is need for a truth and justice commission. So it is only then that we shall realize at least a bit of fairness. We've seen in South Africa to date, Mr. Malema comes out and says, well, you gave us independence, but which kind of independence is it? Is it economic? No, it isn't. You only gave us a right to vote, but we do not own land. It is hard to start a business if you're an African in South Africa, or if you are a Black African, because even the whites call themselves South Africans. So there is need for that independent commission. And the only way to get it is through a peaceful transition. And then the next government can establish that commission that will look into the matters that were unjust and unfair. Like it was in South Africa, like I said, it was after the apartheid that the whites or the Britons said, okay, now we hand over power to the blacks. Then a commission was formed, and then they were able, even though it's not 100% that they realized their benefits, the truth was brought out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Council to be, Council to be, Bazil. Mr. Mitala, when you hear these insights from these young men and women in Uganda who are also striving to ensure that we have a candid conversation, to ensure that as we continue engaging in these conversations, we are listening to each other, and that even the people who have the power right now are listening. Mr. Mwotta brings in something, another aspect of transition. And he brings it in deliberately because he says that it's very hard to have a credible Truth and Justice, Truth and Reconciliation Commission when the exact government that is supposed to facilitate that commission is the same that perhaps the truth could be said about. When we talk about the creation of these forums that we are having, these conversations, seemingly candid conversations. We try to be honest and deliberate here. Uh, but we also do it knowing very well that most recently there is a computer misuse uh, bill, amendment bill that was passed and perhaps is going to be assented to by the president. How do we continue having these truth conversations before the major truth or established truth and reconciliation commission when there are bumps that are coming in to trump these kinds of conversations? uh, Mr. Mitala, what are your thoughts as we move forward with this conversation?
Um, I very much enjoy the points that have been raised by Mr. Mwotta, Bazil. It's quite very interesting points there that are being raised. Obviously, these are things that we talked about last week, and we said that in order for these fact-finding commissions to be effective, there needs to be political willingness. The elite, there's got to be the political buy-ins by the political elite in order to, make these processes, effective and meaningful. Otherwise, without that, the whole exercise is a whitewash, and it takes us back to the previous two that we have had, which we have already analyzed and made the conclusion that they were whitewashes because the starting point there was no sincerity in these processes. There was no sincerity. There was a lack of transparency. Basil talked about who are the people who are going to be charged with carrying out these functions and these exercises. What sort of people are we looking at? And again, I raised this sentiment last week that we need to look at the suitability of the candidates who are going to sit on those panels to make those determinations. Now, ultimately, for me as a lawyer, I take a little bit of a different approach because my approach, I pose it in questions. And the question that I would ask is that does the truth and, these fact-finding commissions, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, if we had one, what impact could they have on our democratization process? Because one of the things that you really can't take away from these reconciliation processes is that there has got to be public engagement. This is not about the other party. It's about the public. It's about the people, But there has got to be that willingness by those who have got power or those who are in charge to put themselves aside and accept and acknowledge. The whole exercise is about acknowledging that, hey, look here, I think we have a problem. And if we're having a problem, can we talk? And if we can talk, how does it affect people on the receiving end? For me, I always want to look at it in a juxtaposed kind of scenario where I'm asking myself the question is that would truth and reconciliation processes, would they be a substitute to prosecutorial justice, to our state and non-court systems? Would it be a substitute? Because it's different, it's different it's different to talk about and come here when we are animated, a very fine English and discuss, the different aspects of truth and reconciliation commissions and what they can do and what they cannot do without tackling the issue of impunity, because the entire essence of the law is to punish. I mean, a society that is not that cannot punish its wrongs cannot heal. For me, that's the perspective that I take. Because first of all, wrongs are being committed against other people. Yes, the truth and reconciliation arrangements can serve a benefit, can serve a certain purpose. But I think our starting point should be the prosecution aspect of it. Except if we are willing to acknowledge the fact and accept that, we do not have the capacity, to go through, the judicial systems as we would in normal circumstances. Because I'll set out for you the benefits of having a prosecution as against having a truth and reconciliation kind of thing. First of all, prosecutions, they help to establish the rule of law. because then everybody is clear on what are the rules, what is acceptable within the confines of the law and what is not acceptable, you know. So that is the first starting point. You know, we have to look at we have to look at the situation that advances the rule of law, so that it makes every man equal, you know, before the courts of justice. That if you, Henry, if me, Julius, or if you, Bazil, you've committed a crime against another human being, the first standing point is not for you to be granted a pardon without even you acknowledging that, you know, I have committed a crime, because you have to, there's got to be that acknowledgement. That's the starting point. And I'm saying here that, you know, we have got to be able to face up to our, you know, illusions and accept our truths and our facts, that this is what the problem is, and therefore we know what the problem is. So how do we navigate away from that? Then we can make the choices and say, okay, we are going either prosecutorial or we are going into a truth and reconciliation kind of situation. So for me, that's the approach I'll take. So you know, prosecution sets a firm foundation for assessing the benefit and compensation of the victims. And even though in truth and reconciliation commissions, their mechanism is there, you know, to navigate all these issues. Who are the victims? Give them an opportunity to be able to tell their story and so on and so forth. But I think we run a risk, especially in the kind of issues that Bazil has raised, that the legitimacy of these processes is always at stake. Because number one, especially in situations like ours, even we are talking about a transition here, you know, that is, we are hoping that the current establishment will be able to stand aside, or maybe we will go through an election, like the sort of thing that we have seen in Kenya, where, you know, there has been a clear and transparent process of change of power from one person to another, you know, and therefore the new coming administration now can set itself on a path of saying, okay, we are going to have a truth and reconciliation kind of process, because it's a new set of arrangement. But the disadvantage on the other side is that these sorts of, you know, the truth and reconciliation process in a transitional kind of arrangement we are talking about, they tend to bring on board the strongman as well, or agents or elements of the strongman, people who have been at the core of, you know, perpetuating these excesses and human rights abuses. They will be part and parcel of the new system, the new arrangement, and therefore they are going to frustrate the whole process. So there are those issues that we need to be looking about. I mean, prosecution sends a very clear message, you know, to the other bloc, that, you know, certain conduct is not going to be accepted, because you are at risk if you engage in this kind of, it's a deterrent kind of mechanism. If you engage in this kind of, you know, conduct, you know, the risk is that you'll be prosecuted, and therefore it puts a control, it puts like that barrier of control, a layer of control over what people can and what people cannot do, you know. But then we have this situation where, you know, court orders are deliberately ignored, you know. The High Court makes an order, and the order is, it doesn't exist, it's not being made, you know. And how do we trust in the people who are in charge of these processes? They are independent of the current in our current arrangement. So these are questions that we need to be looking about, you know. So again, and I'm saying that you know, prosecution can facilitate a proper healing process of society. It can really facilitate that, because you know, as I'm saying, a society that cannot punish its wrongs cannot really think about genuine healing, because there's got to be some kind of retribution, you know. The saying is that justice has got to be seen to be done, you know. So would you be able to bring all these aggrieved people on board, unless there is a consensus, unless there is some kind of referendum where the people will say, okay, we as a people, we are choosing, and we think it's best for us to go through a truth and reconciliation process as opposed to a prosecutory kind of process. Then, of course, if that's the decision of the people, it's the decision of the people. And in any democratic dispensation, the decision of the people, decision of the masses is critically important. But for me, the point I'm making is that there has got to be that strong willingness from the political elite and also from within the masses to acknowledge that we have problems amongst ourselves within our society, that there are problems. And until we acknowledge that there are problems, I think the process of confronting these problems, which with whichever process we choose, whichever direction we choose to go, it becomes more meaningful, it becomes more realistic after there's been that acknowledgement that, here is a problem, we acknowledge there's a problem, this is how we are going to deal with this problem. At the moment, I do not sense that. And because I'm not sensing that there is that willingness to acknowledge that there is a problem, then the only alternative that I can think about is to pursue, prosecution, either at a domestic level or in any international fora, whichever is reasonably achievable for us. That would be my approach in that kind of scenario. You are muted, Henry.
Sorry, what I'm hearing you say is that this conversation, while seemingly important, may not yield a lot of good, given that even when such an entity is established, uh, it may not yield the results that we are looking for. First of all, because there's no political will and there's no acceptance of wrongdoing by the powerful. Uh, of course, even last week you mentioned that Truth and Reconciliation Commissions usually do not have the power to implement their recommendations. But now you have also asked another very important question, which is that what should be the basis of assessing and compensating the victims? Of course, we have to establish who the victims are, who are the victims, and that justice has got to be saved in order to be done. Now, my question, and this is a question to both to both Mr. Mwotta and Hellen. Do you folks think that we can afford to believe in a Truth and Reconciliation Commission when we are having trouble believing in our institutions such as the parliament, the justice system? Can there be trust for such an entity if it's created, if there's no trust for the legislature or the justice system, or even the executive? Because the executive, even when it's referred to as one, it seems to be working on the directives of the one person that leads that executive. I wonder what your thoughts are, Hellen, starting with you.
Well, my thoughts are, here we're talking about truth and reconciliation.
Your voice is very low.
Oh, you can get me well now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yes, I am saying we are talking about truth and reconciliation. And we're talking about the truth as in not a hoax, but truth as in its definition as truth. If you have to talk about truth, then that means we should start with it, even with the composition of the people that will institute the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We should set it independent, first of all. That is where the truth will start from. But the moment we restrict it again to appointments which are not legit and which are not on merit, still we shall have problems and it will not perform to its perfection. So the best way of it is having it as an independent based on merit, based on legitimacy. Not that it is based on this is my person. And good, at least for now, we have a very independent institution, that is the Democratic Party, to which I subscribe to. We had this very Truth and Reconciliation Commission in our 2021 manifesto. Now, our Honorable Minister is the one to spearhead it. And this is, I tell you, is a katengo. Because we have got to exercise what we can ably do in this ministry. So we must first of all exercise independence and know that we are working for Ugandans, first of all, it will start with dialogue. We must dialogue within ourselves, and it is through dialogue that we shall discover whether this happened and this happened. I am still thinking about the prosecution that Council Mitala is talking about, because now when you talk of prosecution and then you look into this government, I do not know that I do not know whether that can work, because even if it's you and we are talking about the truth, you're going to talk about the truth, and next is prosecution, you're headed for this, it will have a little bit of scrabble. So the truth that we are talking about, actually, I am glad Mwotta brought in the issue of transition. The truth that we are talking about is the fact that this and this happened, but we need this country to head here. Yes, the heading here we are talking about right now is transition, which is very, very necessary and timely. It has actually delayed. So, can we have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, very independent, set aside to play that role? If not, then we are seated on a time bomb, and anything can happen within the shortest period of time.
Right. Thank you so much for those insights. Mr. Mwotta, your thoughts? Of course, you have been cited in the previous conversation. So, what are your thoughts, and how do we establish an independent Truth and Reconciliation Commission, really, within this context? Or should we first go through transition, then think about establishing such an entity? And is that feasible in this context?
Well, with all due respect, allow me start with this. The police has a right to shoot you and to kill you. With all due respect, for reconciliation to happen, the Catholic Church has a very good practice of reconciliation through the sacrament of penance. One has to recognize that they are at fault. One has to state his or her sins and then seek absolution. When you say the police has a right to shoot you and kill you, it means that the injustices done are valid in your eyes. My question is, if we, the public, if we, the people, are willing to reconcile, is the government willing to reconcile? Are they willing to accept that, look here, in 2020, before the election, Noob claims that 450 people were abducted unlawfully. Are we able, is the government able to accept that this happened? As I speak now, Facebook is no more in Uganda. There is that freedom of expression. It is a right. Is it there in Uganda? It isn't. Is the government ready to accept and say, oh, look here, we did this, but we are at fault? The internet shut down during the election. Is the government willing to accept these things? Or will they say, okay, we are in power and there is nothing you can do about it. We can shoot you and we can kill you. So if these people can't accept these things, let's say a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is formed and they ask these hard questions and they get these people, will they comply with whatever the commission has come with? That takes us back to the transition that we need as a nation. For healing to go on in the nation, people need to accept their faults. That, look here, well, we have governed well, but there are these mistakes we made, and we are sorry. And for us Africans, sorry, I think it's in our culture. People tend to think that when you say you're sorry, you're weak. I saw it with Theresa May when she was still prime minister. She came out and said, "I'm sorry," eh, to the public. So it's not bad to acknowledge one's fault. And this is an opportunity for all of us to call upon this government and maybe people that belong to the governments before it that committed injustices. My colleagues have talked about the Idi Amin government and what have you. There is need to come out and say, look, we did this. We are sorry. How are we moving forward? How shall we establish a commission that is independent, that will look into these matters and ask those hard questions? We need people who will ask those hard questions, not people who will dilly-dally with the people who committed the atrocities. So there is need for a transition. There is need to seek for the truth and justice. And many people know the truth, but they do not want to accept it. There is need to recognize that, yes, we are at fault. Eh? And then we say, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. We are at fault and we are indeed sorry. And then we can move forward. But like Council Mitala said, you see, you don't make faults and you think we shall be like the Catholic Church and we say, okay, now say one Hail Mary and go. For the society to learn, there should be a penalty for these people. Eh? You do not kill 20 people or 400 people and you think, of course, the Catholic Church will forgive you and you will say one Hail Mary and go. But then for people to realize that there is justice, there should be a penalty so that those who will come after you will know that it is wrong to abduct people, that it is wrong to use a gift that was given to us by Vint Cerf when he formed TCPIP as a free gift, the internet. I got an award in Los Angeles for using the internet to help people from the Internet Society, the body that governs internet. Vint Cerf gave the internet as a free gift. And then you come and say you're going to levy taxes on it, you're going to shut it down. There is need for acceptance that the faults are there. They should seek penance, not in the Catholic Church alone, but also among the people. And then they should serve their sentence. Thank you.
When we come back in a minute, we are going to examine whether acceptance of wrongdoing will actually, if people in power reach an extent where they are willing to accept wrongdoing, is the public ready to forgive them? When we come back.
This is the state of the nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Ssali.
Of course, these conversations happen at 7 p.m. Kampala. I have taken long editing that promo. Naye nga mutugoberere ku Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Please follow, like, and share widely so that more Ugandans can engage in this conversation and try to see how we can come up with solutions to better our country. Mr. Mitala, if I am the one in power and come to you acknowledging the wrongdoing that I have that I have orchestrated in the past, are you, the public, ready to forgive me?
You see, what I've intended to do here tonight is I wanted to give uh, two scenarios. One, to make the case for prosecution as the best way towards resolving these post-conflict, problems or post-conflict troubles, and bringing these into the Truth and Reconciliation Commission we're talking about here. But also talk about, on the other hand, also talk about the give or make the argument for actually, going for the reconciliation processes, if so we should. So my starting point is that the best way to deal with this matter is to consider the court system, the prosecutorial system, and make sure that those who have perpetrated crimes against the citizens, they are appropriately dealt with within the confines of the law. There is a popular feeling that truth and reconciliation commissions or fact-finding missions, they are suitable for states that are dysfunctional, for failing states, the states that are coming out of conflict, and therefore they lack the capacity to be able to address these sorts of problems. And in this regard, we are taking into account that when you are emerging from a war, or when you are emerging from a very bad dictatorial kind of arrangement, there are certain uh, institutions of state that are not functional. One of those is obviously going to be the court, because the reason people go to court is that they hope that those who have, committed crimes, they will be punished, there will be compensation, there will be retribution, and there will be deterrence, along those lines. But in some respects, there could be a good reason for wanting to avoid, the formal prosecution kind of, arrangement, and go for truth commissions as the best way of resolving these issues. And one of the points that I'm pointing out here is that the lack of the preparedness by states, to be able to effectively prosecute, because in order for us to have an effective prosecution, and avoid inconclusiveness of processes where you go to court and cases fail because for lack of evidence, or because the process has been frustrated by those in power, because they are very connected, or they know the judges, or the judges are impartial, and that kind of things. In order to avoid that kind of situation, you might find yourself that there is good reason, maybe for practical reasons or for policy arrangements, to make sure that we are recommending a truth commission as a way of resolving these sorts of problems. Um, but you see, even in that regard, I think I want to reposit myself on the other side, that really makes or has the view. I have the firm view that these informal kind of arrangements, they destabilize even the transitional arrangements we have, because as I've already stated in my case, it's very difficult to create a scenario where in our car, because I don't want to look in any other situations. There are examples that can be given. For instance, when you talk about the German, the prosecution of the Nazi for the Nuremberg crimes, the Nazi had been defeated completely. Their state was disarray. Basically, they were running away. It was easy to pick them up. It was easy to identify them and bang them in court, and crimes had been properly recorded. It was easy, to amass that kind of evidence and be able to use them. But in our situations, it may not be the same, because people have been in state, they have been at the helm of government, either directly or through their agents, and they've got a very heavy influence on our processes. That this is why we're asking the question that who would be on these commissions. I mean, in our Uganda, and I'm sorry for being a cynical or a skeptic actually in that respect, we've seen so many situations where honorable people, people that you have high regard for, people that you have high regard for, people you want to look up to and say, I think this gentleman, if he speaks, I can be persuaded, I can go with them. And then they are swept under the carpet. So what confidence does the public can the public get from scenarios of such a kind where, say, suppose Mr. XY is appointed to be the chairman of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Uganda, and then the next day is hobnobbing with people who have been accused of these very crimes against the people? I mean, where do you expect the public to get, the confidence that the people who are carrying out these exercises are carrying out these exercises in their name? I mean, for me, I can only ask questions. I don't have the answers, but I want people to be to be intrinsic and be able to look on the other side of things and put things in context, because that's the point that I'm making, that these processes that we are chatting about here, it's very nice to come and discuss the law and paint it and come up with all these beautiful recommendations as truth and reconciliation commissions always do. They publish reports, very heavy reports. Some of them never get to see the day of the light. We have an example, our own 1986 situation. Ask how many Ugandans, even people who are well familiar with things, ask them how many of them have seen the text of the Uganda Truth and Reconciliation Commission of 1986 that was conducted by the late Justice Odell. How many Ugandans have seen that report? I understand, and I've read this, it's on record. People have done research about it, that the report was published. There were even pamphlets that were created that were supposed to be cascaded or transmitted within the general public, so that the consciousness of the nation, that we the people, according to the preamble of our constitution, saying that we must never go back to this because we accept and we acknowledge that there were excesses within that period that were unjustifiable. It's the preamble of our constitution, and on the basis of that, the commission was set up and it published a report, and that report never saw the day of the light. So where is the confidence today that we are going to be able to navigate that problem there? So for me, I do have concerns, to that extent. But is there a case for truth and reconciliation commissions? Of course there is, especially if the public is anchoring for it, if the public is demanding for it. As I said before, the role, the voice of the masses in these sorts of things is the most central, kind of voice that we've got to be listening to. So if the people are saying that we need to sit down and have a national conversation, but the trouble is that this has not been tested. Has it been put to a referendum? Has there been, a research that has indicated that this is what the public is asking for? We are just only hearing, voices, random voices from here and there, whether for people who are looking for, their own political agendas or for whatever reason. The parameters of having this conversation are not clear. They have not been set out properly, so that to be able to set a clear agenda and say, okay, we do accept that there is a problem. There has been a problem since 1962. We have endured through this problem. Constitutions have been changed, constitutions have been made, governments have been changed by force. There has been atrocities, there has been mass murders, there has been arbitrary detentions. We have got to acknowledge that. And if we do not acknowledge that, then having this conversation is pretty academic, to be honest.
Right.
So,
in 1 minute.
Yeah, that is my feeling, that these exercises, they tend to be ineffective in as far as resolving the challenges that they are set out to resolve. And I have to say again that there are very few cases, and I make the example that even the South African, because the South African is the best example we have closer to home. It was broad, it was sweeping, it had popular support across all areas. But even that one, the best example we can cite closer to home, it actually did not resolve the South African problem. So again, that leads me back to my conclusion that I think we need to consider dealing with these matters in a prosecutory way, that, so this is the only way we can get this impunity out of the way, because people have got to be made to understand that when you occupy office, You are a custodian, you are a trustee, you are carrying out executive functions as a trustee on behalf of the people. If you exceed your responsibilities, if you exceed your power and mandate, you are committing a crime, and therefore that crime can be prosecuted. That is the only deterrence we can have in order to be able to forge forward. At least that is my view in as far as this is concerned.
Right, right. You cited the South African as the closest example. Of course, there was also the Kenyan one. But as you rightly say, that the South African one was more broadly followed and had a lot for us to learn from, even though the perpetrators seem to have been mostly European South Africans. Uh, Sayun, you cited DP as one of the organizations that establishes truth and justice. Of course, the slogan is truth and justice. And now you are very closely working with the current government. Your President General is the Minister of Justice. Do you think your President General has the capacity uh, to establish such a conversation, uh, given what is going on right now? And uh, can people trust the DP, for example, in establishing such an entity of truth and reconciliation?
Thank you so much, sorry. To start with, Council Mitara also needs truth and reconciliation alone because he's doubting too much. I, I don't know why he's doubting so much. But well, to start with, one thing I want to tell you is that you can. Not all dreams are not right. You, when the day you dream of urinating on bed, you will urinate there. So the whole thing is, to start with, Democratic Party has been all along championing for this. That why can't we sit and talk as a country? You talk of hobnobbing with the regime, but then how are you going to get to talk to someone you're not talking to? Dialogue. It is all going to start with dialogue. That we need to accept that we can sit on a round table and dialogue and agree that this and this happened. You realize DP is a pre-independence party, and we contributed a lot towards the liberation and independence of this country, by the way. So we understand and we know how to shape this country with the experience of how we've been here longer. So the best thing we can do is have the trust within ourselves first. The problem that we're having as Ugandans is that we don't even have the trust. We don't even want to try something. We just want to sit back and start lamenting and believe that things will work themselves out. No. Until you try it, then it won't work out. So DP has taken a step to step forward and see whether this can work out. Because until we try it, then we cannot do it. Then the best thing now we need is to support Honorable Mao. Now that has gotten there, something can be done. Let us not just be negative from the start. Because I believe that when you have the space and you have the zeal, all you need now is support for the people that have sober minds, and can guide. Because this is a government that is almost, it's at the helm. I am looking at this government is almost somewhere where there is a little bit of confusion. You look at people are talking of Mho's project, and then there are also these opposition political parties that also have capacities to lead. And then there is also some emerging leader somewhere whom maybe we've not seen, but will emerge and become a leader in the future there. So we need to reconcile all these ones. So what we need now is a bridge. Someone that can bridge all these people and sit them down and say this is where the country can go. Otherwise, if we continue having people saying you cannot join this government, and then there are those that are saying we cannot even come closer to the junta. There are those that are already throwing stones at Honorable Mao for for stepping in to be in the Ministry of Justice. But then, if at all we are not there to do it, then who is going to do it for us? If we keep all shying away and saying that, you cannot work with this government. Because I believe, though this is an appointment that comes from the president of the country, of whom I believe most of the people are aggrieved with. It's an appointment with him. But then what if you go with your sober mind? Does that mean that when President Museveni appoints you, then your brain becomes brainwashed? I do not really think, and I don't believe in that. So I believe that the best thing now we can do is to give support to Democratic Party as a whole, not only to Honorable Mao, give them the necessary support so that we can give them ideas on what can be done, and also step forward where there is need and help this to work out. Otherwise, we are into a time where we need all of us to realize the truth and have trust. Because the first thing that I am looking at is, it seems there is a breakage of trust, where trust no longer exists within ourselves. That every time we look at someone now, we are looking at someone who is going to government to eat. We are looking at someone who is going to join government to commit atrocities, to help the government do inequality, to help in moving injustices. But then we need to work on our mindset. In our campaign, we were telling Ugandans that we have among the problems that we have here is fear among Ugandans.
Right. Are you done?
And so these are the things that we need to work on as quickly as we can and as possible.
Right, right. Well, you continue to make a case for your President General, which I truly appreciate. I think loyalty is very important within political realms. I haven't read Mr. Honorable Mao's priorities, 10 priorities or 5 priorities or 3 priorities. I don't know what his priorities are as Minister of Justice. So I have no yardstick for evaluating him. But I've also seen some social media sentiments alluding to the notion that he said that president can be chosen by parliamentarians or can be chosen in parliament. I'm not sure. I'm not completely sure how true that sentiment is. I don't know if he actually said it. But like I said, we cannot evaluate Mao without necessarily knowing what his priorities are, even when we would like to have a dialogue. I guess I'm going to leave that to Mr. Mwotta and Mr. Mitala to respond. Do you guys think that we have an opportunity in Mao to start this dialogue?
Before you jump ahead, just allow me to make very quick 6 points. I'm just going to read them very quickly, because I've said that the best approach to resolve this problem would be to go down the route of prosecuting the perpetrators of human rights abuses. But I just want to set out just a couple of very quick things. The grounds that would make a truth and reconciliation arrangement work effective, and I'm just going to quickly reference them by way of bullet points. Number one, where there is lack of resources and preparedness, to effectively prosecute, so we are talking about weak judicial systems, whose benefit would only work, to frustrate the or just, facilitate the demise of our democracy. Lack of popular mandate, this always happens where we are in some form of a power sharing arrangement, because that means you are pulling separate groups from left, right, and center, where it may not be very easy, to form consensus on how to forge the way ahead. And therefore, it brings about, that means that compromises have got to be made on either side, which compromises might not be very effective in facilitating, truth and reconciliation. Secondly, we're talking about, weak court systems. these kind of scenarios happen a lot where we have military kind of courts that tend you use. We have a scenario where in our own situation we have a military court that has got the remit of trying civilians in military courts for cases that they shouldn't be there. It's a sign of weakness within our systems, because what it does is that it delegitimizes the prosecutory, space for these sort of things to be dealt with. So in that case, where we have a scenario like that, then you might make the case that the truth and reconciliation might be the best way forward. Secondly, or lastly, uh, it is impossible. Usually, it's impossible to prosecute all human rights abuses and excesses. It's practically impossible, because to do that, that means you'll have to separate them in different categories and decide that only those that reach a certain threshold can be prosecuted. Effectively, what that means that those that do not meet the threshold for prosecution, they don't matter. And that leaves people the leeway, to behave as they wish. And this is what brings about this so-called impunity, because people can pick you up in a drone. Nobody knows where you are. It's not big enough. Nobody has died, even though a few people have been kicked about, but it's not really that important. Therefore, that's not very significant, so we can look away from that. So that kind of separating and that kind of separation of those different aspects kind of creates maybe a desirable space for a truth and reconciliation kind of exercise to take place, because what that means is that those who are afflicted and they are not able to seek justice from the courts of law or other mechanisms, then they can come forward. We can talk about our experiences in our own voices. We can have a record, and that record, if it's done transparently, it can possibly be able to facilitate, our democracy and make us a better people. So those are just observations I just wanted to add on to why maybe a reconciliation exercise might be, necessary in some regards.
Mr. Mwotta, your thoughts after having heard all these insights from our sister Helen and Mr. Mittal, of course, re-establishing what could bring about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that works. Your thoughts, Mr. Mwotta?
Yes, thank you, Henry. Helen has talked about how they, as DP, the party, kyetuyita ekibiina ky'abajjajjaffe, that is hinged on truth and justice. So for them, they have elected to join. I hope I'm putting it right. To join the NRM government in a bid to seek truth and justice. I think Mr. Norbert Mao is a very brilliant person. Studied at Yale, he's a lawyer, he's very brilliant. But for me, I believe DP accepting a ministry, say, of justice, is it really helpful to the ordinary Ugandan, or is it helpful mostly to the big wigs in Democratic Party, say Norbert Mao, who is now a minister, Kasambide, or the big wigs, as an ordinary Ugandan who is seeking for justice? Do we really get the justice when Mr. Museveni gives Mr. Norbert Mao a ministry? I think that by joining them, Mr. Norbert Mao makes it look like they are genuine people. They have served well. That is why he's willing to go and serve with them. I think we need to have candid conversations. We need to ask the questions that people do not want to hear, but they are the questions that will bring out the truth. A lot of atrocities have been committed. There is need for justice. The truth is known to everyone. We all know it. and they also know it. How are we getting justice? We're not getting justice through joining them. No, we are getting justice through standing still, like Rohlila Madiba did for over 27 years in jail until they said no more appetite. He would have joined them midway, maybe after 10 years or 15 years, but he said no. If it needs to be jailed for life, it's okay as long as appetite comes to an end. So joining them for me is really not the best thing. The best thing is for every Ugandan not to look at maybe Dr. Besije or to look at Bobby Wine for justice. We need to look for justice ourselves, each one of us. We need to stand and say, no, this is unjust, this is unfair, and we need a system that runs for the people, a system that defends the people. We need an end to the oppression. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwotta. I'm going to give my sister Sayun an opportunity to respond to that before we go into our final remarks. We have about 10 minutes. So uh, please, Sayun, respond to that. And then you can, after your response, you can tell us how you think we can actually implement this conversation from an academic dialogue to something practical, something more practical. How do we bring in more stakeholders to engage in this conversation and actually be interested in actually establishing such an entity if it must be established for a better Uganda, for a future Uganda now?
Thank you so much, Ssali. To maybe to respond to Bazil, what DP did is not an merger, is not an alliance, and it is just an agreement. And we just cooperate on a few things. We didn't join NRM. We know where to. DP knows where to join NRM from. We actually know where the offices are, and every party has its stakes on how you join it. You don't just wake up and sign an agreement and then you join. You must have a party card and all that. There are a lot of stakes on how you join another political party. But for us as DP, we have always been pro people. We do not believe that sitting aside and then watching this government do a lot of crashing and we are not taking part in reshaping what we call this country can work. And that is why I insist that it is high time that we agreed that we must talk. Because maybe for starters, we have to agree that we have participated in elections right from 2000s and what. We've been participating in elections, hoping that this government can get out of the way, but it is not. We've gone for violence, actually gone an extra mile of joining NRM in its own game, because NRM is the mastercard of violence. We've joined it. It has not worked. What remains here for us now, it is sitting together and agreeing that actually we can work here. Every political party has had, or someone maybe was intended to lead this country. Maybe you've had a manifesto. How about you sat down and said, it has not worked, but then this is where I want this country. You throw it in the face of these people and see whether they can actually implement it. But then if you wish to lead this country and then you get your whole manifesto and all your dreams and all your good thoughts about how this country can work, and then you put them in your pocket and you decide that you will sit, let's say at City House where our offices are, with them, you've not even helped, then that means you're not helping this country. Because for us, some people want to believe that not dialoguing with maybe Museveni or people in government is maybe giving Museveni headache. It does not. It actually suppresses and it hurts the people to whom we wish to work with, because to get there we want to work for the people, not for this government. And I want to categorically state that we are Honorable Mao and DP signed this agreement for Ugandans and not for the ruling government. For us, we are pro people and we want to work for this government. And maybe on how this agreement can work is, and on how this truth and reconciliation, the dialogue, all that we are looking for, how can it work? We all have good ideas. How about we continued engaging and we engage people who we know can get us there, instead of sitting back first and then we watch these things being done in wrong ways. We have a stake in this country, you people. This country is ours. Sitting back and leaving it to these people and we tell them, take it where you want it to go. No, we have a voice, we can speak against it, and we actually have a stake that you can be given a ministry, you can be given what, and then you get there and perform and work for Ugandans. That is all I can call you for, and that is all I have for this evening. Thank you so much, Sadi.
Thank you so much, Sayun, for that contribution. Mr. Mitala, how do we wrap up this conversation?
Before Mr. Mitala, allow me just 1 minute.
Right.
So my sister Helen is talking of a scenario of a man who has a wife, a girlfriend, two girlfriends, one formal and the other is a side dish. So he gives the one that he loves a ring, engagement ring. And when the other complains, he's like, no. It is just an engagement ring. You know, you are the one I love. Eh? So that is the scenario my sister Helen is explaining. So Mr. Mao is dining with Mr. Museveni, and he's telling us, no, don't worry. I'm doing this on behalf of you, the people, and I want to save you from this injustice. Eh?
Right. Well, Mr. Mitala, you have had the comparisons, the scenarios, and of course, Helen has laughed it off.
Yeah.
Do you think the cooperation, Mr. Mitala Mr. Mao calls it the cooperation. The cooperation doesn't want to call it an alliance or a joining of the NRM. He calls it a cooperation, and but I think we also have to actually interrogate, how are we going to have this Truth and Reconciliation Commission if we are struggling to speak with the people who we think are powerful and could potentially be the ones who set up that kind of entity? I think that's another legitimate question. And of course, I know I have two lawyers in the house who are also always very good at asking questions and letting people figure out what the right way forward is. But Mr. Mitala, let us wrap up this conversation.
On the cooperation between the DP and the NRM, I'm not a member, or I'm not a card holding member of the DP, although I'm sympathetic, in some respects. I have to say that I am disappointed with Mr. Mao in quite so many, forums for the things that for the things that he actually espouses and the way he's handled some of those things. I think, and I say this very painfully because I admire the man. I remember him on Capital Gang. I remember him when I was a young university law student. People that you looked up to. He's a great speaker, and I think he's got everything that can enable him to be president of the country and possibly be even a very good president. But I'm disappointed on a number of occasions. Number one, his use of language against adversaries is really not very good. I've heard him refer to people as a mome. I think that's disrespectful of him. But particularly on this cooperation thing, it's troubling for me because, and I'll try to look at it very quickly in this perspective. Say if you have a company, because political parties work like companies, they've got shareholders, they've got board directors and so on and so forth. I think a director of a company or the management committee cannot, in its entirety, substantially, alter the constitution of a company without consulting the shareholders. That's a basic principle of company law. I think that that's how political parties operate. From what I understood, Mr. Mao, together with his working committee, they came up with an arrangement where the shareholders of the company were not consulted, and the party constitution in brackets was effectively, changed. Though a very key and substantive, element of the party structure or its objective or something, along those lines seems to have been compromised without having a consultation with the other party members. I think I find that very problematic. In a normal sense of things, I don't think it would pass the test of legitimacy, to be very honest. But that's how I feel about that. I said I am I admire Mr. Mao very much. So I hope when he sees me speaking like this, he won't be disappointed. But we have to we have to state the facts as they are, or at least how we perceive them. And I think perhaps he needs to be given an opportunity so that he can explain himself properly of what his objective, what his agenda is, so that maybe people can best understand him. I think that's what I could say on that by and large. In regards to what we've been talking about, the key thing that we need to be conscious of is the aspect of acknowledgement, the admission that something is true as stated, or something that so that the claims, can have some authority. You need to acknowledge that there is a problem. If we are not acknowledging that there is a problem in our social coherency, in our in ourselves as Ugandans, because there is a problem there. I can see the tension and I can sense the tension, and I think everybody senses this tension. Obviously, if having some kind of meaningful conversation can help us to resolve that problem, it's a welcome measure. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there needs to be some kind of mechanism that we have to use to be able to chart, a better way forward. The only challenge we have is that we have been there, we have precedents, and we know why those precedents failed in the first place. Maybe we could learn lessons from there and say to ourselves that in the first instance we failed, we're not going to make the same mistakes again. Let's try it one other time and see if it can deliver us to the promised land. That would be my observation for today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala, for those insights. Mr. Mwotta, well, and of course, you're wrapping up on this conversation. Your thoughts and how to proceed. When you are done, I'm going to ask Ms. Sayuni to wrap up this conversation, but also it would be interesting to hear from you guys, you folks, who are some of the other stakeholders that we should invite in having this conversation, and how should we continue to elevate it or progress this conversation, because I think it's an important conversation. There's a culture in Uganda of talking about things and then sweeping them under the rug. How do we not sweep this under the rug and actually get something done out of it? Mr. Mwotta.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Henry, for this opportunity, for this platform. We need more of these, and it helps bring people up to speed with what's happening. Like I said before, there is need for a transition. There is need for a transition. We have had enough. There is need to bring justice to people. We need to do more action. Not, of course, these forums are good. Such fora are good, and talking about this is good. But we need action. We need to hit the roads. We need to do something about the injustices that are inflicted on us and the people. It's good that such platforms have come up, and thank you, Henry, for this initiative. It helps enlighten the people so that people get to know these things. Certain people don't even know that there have been truth and justice commissions before elsewhere in the world. They don't know if it's possible in Uganda. So to bring such ideas is good. I want to end by calling upon all Ugandans. Do not look at your leaders for justice. Look at yourself. Start with yourself. Start with the family. Start with the community. It is these small numbers of people that will come up together and form a voice that no one can stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwotta. Sister Sayun, your thoughts? Of course, we did not intend to put DP on the stand. It just ended up being there by default, I guess. But what are your thoughts as you wrap up? And do you think you can get us Mao on this platform, Honorable Minister Mao, so that he can give us some insights on, well, first of all, we don't know what his priorities are or his agenda as Minister of Justice, and to explain better what that so-called cooperation means for Ugandans uh, now and in the future.
Thank you so much.
Your voice is very low.
I will share with you the probably the draft of our 2021 elections manifesto, to which you will find that Truth and Reconciliation Commission part of. That means we didn't dream of it yesterday. I can ably also share for 2016, 11 around it, if I happen to find it still in my documentation, because I just lost my phone of recent. I don't know whether I can recover that. But the fact is that this Uganda belongs to all of us. This Uganda is me. This Uganda is you, Ssali, and this Uganda is Mitala. So we have stakes in this country, and we must talk about where we want it to go. We want religious leaders on board. We should have cultural leaders on board. Political leaders, of course, you cannot avoid politics in any way. That's how Democratic Party ended here, where it wasn't supposed to be talked about. So we shall lead also political leaders, and actually not all political leaders, sober political leaders, sober. I want to say it again, sober. People who know where this country wants to go. We need to sit as generations, aggrieved generations. All generations have different issues. All generations should talk about this. We have three almost generations, and every generation seems it is their time. So what are we going to do about it? Every generation has done all it takes. Every generation sees that it can get there. So how are we going to avoid that? We are talking of transition. But as we talk of transition, and maybe Muhozi, maybe Honorable Mao, maybe Bobby Wine, maybe Besigye is preparing, there is also a Helen seated here and thinking she can make it there. So all that is what actually should steer us very fast and make us think of how we need this country to run. And we can only run this country properly if we sit down, dialogue, and draw a map and draw lines on how we want to get there.
Right.
We can engage Honorable Mao anytime, any day, and get his time to address. He's a very fine gentleman, so you can get him. I will make sure I draw for you the channel on which you can get him, so that he can come and you hear him yourself also. I want to thank you so much and wish you a very nice evening and morning and afternoon to all the time people.
Thank you, thank you so much, Helen, for those insights. The Honorable Mao was accessible before he became minister, and I'm not sure is accessible anymore. We used
In
to
fact,
have
now
him
he's
on.
very accessible.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to
These
give
days
you a
it's
task.
very accessible.
I am going to give you a task to get him back to the state of the nation. I know he has been on several Twitter spaces, but perhaps people would be more interested in seeing his face and learning what his agenda is as Minister of Justice. I thought one of his uh, very primary priorities would be to free all political prisoners. He hasn't done so yet. Probably he's still working on his priorities. But we are counting down his 100 days as we do for all leaders. And we hope that within the 100 days, he will have done something that shows that this is indeed just a cooperation and not a marriage to NR to NRM. It's been a pleasure hosting you folks. We always enjoy having these conversations, but we need to remove these conversations from the realm of academic dialogues to the streets of Kampala, to the practicalities where they affect people on the ground, where they affect people on their dining tables, for those who have them and actually do have the privilege to have dining tables. And I'm using that metaphor, but when I say dining tables, I mean where people have their lunches and have those conversations while they are with each other. How do we remove this conversation from the academic realm to those people on the ground? Again, it's been a pleasure hosting you. My name is Henry Ssali. This is the State of the Nation. Please let me know who are some of the other stakeholders I should engage in this conversation, and if you do want to come back and interrogate some of the other issues that are happening in Uganda. I know I momentarily brought in the issue of the computer misuse bill. It is something we need to interrogate. Who is it going to affect, and how should Ugandans approach that bill before it becomes effective? These are all conversations that we should engage with. And I hope you can take this week to think about some of the topics that you think are important and that we should talk about in the coming weeks. Again, my name is Henry Ssali, and this is the State of the Nation.
This is the State of the Nation. Ibifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry Ssali.